Hi everyone, welcome to this session on performance management. In this session, we're just going to describe performance management and cover five main areas. So our five learning objectives are illustrated in the presentation today. The first objective, we're going to define performance management and describe the purposes of performance management. The second objective, we're going to explain the process of performance management. The third objective, we're going to describe some of the sources of performance information briefly. For the fourth objective, we're going to talk about the type of perceptual errors that could be committed in the performance management process. The fifth and final objective, we're going to describe what measures we use to evaluate performance. So let's get right into it. So our first objective, which will be to talk a bit about what performance management is. So I have a question here for you. What do you think of when you hear the term performance management? What comes to mind? Take about 5 seconds and think about that. Right. So what did you think of when you heard the term performance management? Well, some people tend to think of performance management as an annual review, a sort of one-time event that happens at the end of the year, which is sometimes equated with what we know as performance appraisal or performance feedback. Okay, fine. Some people also think of fear, anxiety, discomfort, that dreadful meeting where the boss and the employee meets, and there's an annual performance appraisal meeting where the boss picks apart the employee. Some people also think about the boss picking on the employee and scolding the employee for perhaps any deviations from performance during the year. So clearly, all of these misconceptions exist, and that is not what performance management is. So then, let's talk about what performance management actually is. A systematic process for improving performance, organizational performance, by developing the performance of individuals and teams. So the key term in bold there is improving organizational performance, and that's what performance management is concerned about, not about judging the employee in a sort of scolding manner or a one-time event. Keep in mind it's a process, not an event. Okay? So the performance management can actually deliver many benefits to the organization, for instance, by showing employees that they are valued, especially top performers, and highlighting that for them. It's really more of well, not necessarily just the manager and the employee and the subordinate, but it is a process where employees and supervisors can work together to sort of figure out ways to improve organizational performance. Even though we sometimes hear the term performance management used interchangeably with performance measurement, performance feedback, performance appraisal, and so on, note that these terms are more a subset of what performance management is actually about. In other words, performance management is a broader concept. So what else can performance management be used for? Well, we're going to talk about the purposes just now, but some of the benefits that can be derived from performance management is that it could also encourage communication between managers and their employees. In some organizations, managers and employees may meet now and again whereby instances of performance may come up occasionally, or perhaps just in passing. Performance management actually allows for that to become part of the system in improving that communication between managers and employees with regards to performance and ways to improve performance. It can also help the organization to identify its strongest employees as well as its weakest employees. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit more now about the purposes of performance management. But before we get to that, I'll just ask you to take a look at this video that I will provide a link to the video separate to the presentation. So I'll skip past the video for now, but take a look at it at this point, and I'll talk now about the purposes of performance management. So we know that performance management is about improving a process for improving organizational performance. What is the purpose of it? Why do we use it? Well, one, for employee development purposes. The performance management system helps us to assess employees' deficiencies in their performance levels and skills. Based on these deficiencies, as you can see in the diagram here, the guy running up the performance chart, I guess, and he realized that, what we're saying is we can assess his deficiencies at this point at the lower levels, and based on that, plan specific developmental needs, perhaps even training, so that he can move up the chart. All right. So it helps us to assess deficiencies in performance and skills and have the organization plan how we're going to address those deficiencies, perhaps through certain developmental activities. 2, determine rewards and compensation. So performance management can feed directly into rewards and compensation as well by providing information for day-to-day decisions about salary, benefits, recognition programs, and so on. And is especially useful for incentive-based systems. So, for example, merit pay, performance-related pay. Let's take, for example, in the university setting, professors are usually paid in a merit-based system, and most universities use that. How can performance management help with a merit-based system? Well, typically, if we can evaluate professors' performance based on certain criteria, for instance, publishing, teaching, community work, and so on, all of that can feed into determining which professors may need to be promoted, perhaps to associate professor, full professor, or senior lecturer, full professor, depending on the system, and thus receive higher levels of pay. So it really helps to feed into these systems that are based upon merit and even piece rate systems and so on. Performance management can feed directly into those type of compensation and reward systems. Third, performance management, of course, which is related to the second point, can enhance motivation because it provides a formal process of acknowledgement and praise. Okay, so in addition to just the monetary aspect, which we can link it to, in the performance management process, particularly during performance appraisal and even during the year, managers can support employees and provide them with feedback that encourages them and acknowledges their improvements. Keep in mind the first point we're saying here: if employees are going to developmental programs and their performance is actually improving over time, via the developmental programs, managers can come in and say, "Hey, good job, you're doing well." And that is a form of acknowledgement and praise that helps to further motivate the employee to continue improving their performance. Performance management can facilitate legal compliance. Claims of unfair dismissal are best supported when the organization has documentation of performance deficiencies. What do we mean by that? Well, if employees are actually dismissed for poor performance, they can sometimes take the organization to court. And if there is a proper performance management system in the organization, actual evidence or documentation of performance deficiencies provides strong evidence and will hold up in court when supporting or showing why an employee was dismissed. Fifth, performance management can facilitate HR planning, human resource planning, by actually alerting the organization to deficiencies in the overall level of skills in the organization, and thus help to plan future staff needs. Finally, performance management can achieve business objectives because performance management should be linked towards business objectives, which is something we'll talk about later. Ensure that employees are channeling their efforts in that direction towards business objectives. Okay, so these are 6 purposes of performance management. We have covered our first objective and we'll move on to the second objective, which is perhaps the biggest focus of this session, which will be to look at the performance management process. This will be covered in the next video.